Hello, everyone. How are you tonight? It's so good to be here with you, ladies. Carol, Claudia, Kathy, it's good to be here with you. Tonight we are in for a treat. Carol will be bringing us a wonderful topic, the isness of things, of it. And this is taking fact from fiction, the story from what's really happening. I can't wait for this topic tonight. I'm Joanna White. I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm so excited for what's happening tonight. I'm always happy when I get to learn from these wonderful ladies. So, being said, we have Claudia Rockenford. She'll tell you a little about herself, Kathy Basil, and of course, Carol Pilkington, who will be talking about the isness of it. So I look forward to that. And like I said, Joanna White, and I'm going to give it to Claudia. You have anything to say?
Hi, Joanna. Hello, ladies. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are thrilled to have you here tonight. I'm Claudia Rocafort. I am a spiritual facilitator and executive and personal life coach. And I can't wait to have this conversation with everyone tonight and to learn from my sisters too. So I'd like to pass it on to Kathy Basil.
Yeah, Kathy Basil here, and I am a transformational life coach and energy healer, and it's all about sorting out what it is that we want to do with our life. And in order to move forward, we got to know what our personal truth is. So who better to share that with us than Miss Carol Pilkington?
Thank you, Kathy. I love these ladies. They're just so wonderful, and we have a great time. We don't take things too seriously, where, if things, fly off the handle and nothing, things are not absolutely perfect, we have fun with it. And that's what we want you to do. Don't take things too personally. Don't take yourself too seriously. And so with that, I'm really excited to present accepting the isness of things, separating fact from fiction, fact from the stories that we tell ourselves. And I'm a spiritual counselor, and I work with people that are going through high anxiety. A lot of high achievers are in high anxiety, and I work with those people to help them work through that so that they can live more in joy and have more energy and be more present to the life that they're living right now. So with that said, this is one of my favorite topics as well. And what I have learned over my lifetime in my own journey is that acceptance is the key to living in present time, is the key to living in joy. And if I can't accept what is, I always create a statement that I can accept. So let me give you an example. Can I accept the unacceptable? Yes, I can accept the unacceptable of whatever is that's before me that I'm having a hard time accepting. So I can remember when I was going through all of my trials and tribulations that I found it really hard to accept the fact that other people didn't think the way I thought. You kind of relate to that? You try.
I'll have those moments.
Right? You try so hard.
Times.
You try so hard to get your point across, and you want to be right, and you want to convince people of what is true for you. And when they don't come along for the ride, it's like, what's wrong? What's wrong with them? Right? Not what's wrong with me, what's wrong with them?
So true.
And so I had to think, oh gosh, other people have their own points of view. Other people are coming from their own reality, just like me.
Oh, right.
And I think when I began to recognize that, and accept that, we all have our own reality tunnel, that if I can accept that,
Mhm.
then I can accept myself and afford that to anybody else that's around me. I think that's one of the key things that we're going through in our world today, is the inability to accept another, to have their own perspectives, their own way of thinking, their own way of living. We try and project what we think life should be, and we want others to conform so that we feel comfortable,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And so when we can really begin to include another in our world, and accept another as they are, where they're at, then we can begin to live more within the flow of life. And another aspect of accepting the isness of things and foregoing the stories that we make up about ourselves and others is so integral to our ability to live happy and joyful lives. I'll tell you one more quick story, and then I'll have everybody come on and join in the conversation. When I was little, I was left in the big department store. My parents and my sister had gone out to the car and were, loading everything into the car. And here I was back at the store crying my heart out.
Mm.
And they didn't realize that I wasn't with them. And that created abandonment issues for me for a while. I felt that I wasn't loved. They didn't care about me, that I wasn't, enough for them to realize that I wasn't even with them anymore. So that's the story that I created about an incident.
Yeah.
The truth is, they didn't leave me in the store. They just didn't realize I wasn't with them. That's the fact.
Yeah.
And I created the story that they didn't love me, that I wasn't enough. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying accepting and seeing the isness of something versus creating the story around it.
Yeah.
Separating fact from fiction. Another real quick one, and then we'll go around. I was, my parents had friends over at night and after a night out, and they were talking around the table, and I was in my bed supposedly sleeping, and I heard them one night say, well, Carol was an accident. So what do you think that left me with? Right? I wasn't wanted. I wasn't really planned for. But the truth is, I just wasn't planned for. It's not that they didn't want me. I just wasn't planned for.
I think at least half of humanity wasn't planned.
Right.
Exactly.
No.
So that's another example of, separating fact from the stories that we tell ourselves and make up about ourselves and we believe throughout our lives until we begin to separate those stories out. So I'm going to pass it on and see how everybody else has been kind of dealing with that kind of scenario and how it's, manifested in their lives. Anybody, just go for it.
Just go for it.
Go ahead,
Kathy.
Donna.
And to me, I believe that we all make up our stories, just like you said. Some of them are super benign, but it makes a huge impact, and it's fascinating to me. I love the psychology of it, like the biology, the neurobiology that's coming out right now, showing that in those formative years up until the age of 9, our little brains are like sponges. So we're picking up, we come in with this clean slate. So everything that happens becomes a memory that somehow we begin to figure out, putting meaning to it, but it's a creation from a child's mind that isn't mature enough to discern what's serving and what isn't serving. We don't have that thought process in mind. So like you said, the darndest little things, something like your mom yelling at you before you're going to run across the street, can be a traumatic experience for a little kid. And that now it's not safe to go outside of my little safety box here, but I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, and he says in terms of what did we make it mean, and then just ask the additional question, what else could it mean? It's like, it's fun at this age. I'm oh Nikes, I'm going to be turning 60. So if there's not stories about what it means to be 60, hello, it's time to begin to write our own story, and create the story. We're living in our own story minds anyways. Make a story that works for you. Mine is, I'm going to be vibrantly healthy and on my crazy mountain bike with I've already got the outfits, Hawaiian shirts. We're all going to be mountain biking for my 80th birthday. So that's a story that works for me.
Yes.
So yeah. So what kind of story are you buying into? Where are you limiting yourself in your world? And what's a story underneath that you might just rewrite?
I love what you just said, Kathy, because this rewriting process changed my life. I spent years in kind of lost in the victim mentality without realizing it, right?
You're the only one.
I'm glad somebody understands. Oh, I love your humor. And so I did this exercise, which was mind-boggling to me. And I'm going to share it because I think it might be helpful to people because it was transformational for me. So one of the many courses and things that I studied and went to and tried to grow and learn from, they asked us to grab our worst story, our most painful story, the most difficult one, right? And share it with somebody else as we relive it, as we imagined it to be, as we felt it was. Then they asked us to do it with laughter, telling it like it was a joke, right? Creating the exact same story, the same pain, the same difficulties, but sharing it as though it was the funniest thing you could ever imagine.
Wow.
And of course, as the worst, most dramatic thing you could imagine. And then they asked us to see if we could just keep the facts straight. What actually happened. And to notice that everything else was the story, was our perception, was our experience, but not the facts. And it was so incredibly liberating for me because it made me all of a sudden say, wow, I saw it for the first time. It was so clear to me that, okay, everything else other than the facts is perception, is a story. It's my opinion or my perception of reality. And the sad thing is, like you said, those memories that we create in childhood, we don't have the maturity to distinguish, is this real or is this my perception?
Right.
We don't get that until we're adults. And sometimes not even then.
Or you might legitimately have like a narcissist for a mom. She might have said some wickedly, bad things about you, but then go ahead. You go, girl.
I was going to say, and sometimes parents don't even know they're saying bad things to you.
Yeah, they're not even conscious of it, right?
They're not conscious of it because that's how they were raised. So then that's how they say, when they say generational curse, is really how you're raised and what you see happening over and over again in your family. That is what usually causes the habits of people, is what I like to call them, because that's all they are, because they can all be changed. And
well,
just like
raising consciousness, right?
Yeah, like it can all be changed. And that's the beauty of all of this, is being able to change the story, like you said, and not have it our fact. Like even for me, I don't want to say so many traumatic things, but I've had quite a few in life. And the more I study and the deeper I go, like even into the body, how a blow to us changes our breathing pattern from a child, just how we breathe. It doesn't even go down till we become chest breathers. And if we could breathe to our stomach down to our diaphragm, that changes the minute you ever fell off of a bike or got punched in your stomach as a kid. Our breathing pattern changes from that because we don't ever want to feel that blow again. And that's how our stories change. We don't ever want to feel that story again. So we start creating these patterns. Oh, it's so deep.
Because we build these
Be
defensive
here all
mechanisms.
night.
It's amazing. We develop these defensive mechanisms to try to kind of protect ourselves from re-experiencing that pain. And we create that truth. Well, my father abandoned me, or he couldn't, maybe he didn't have the finances to come visit. Maybe he had to go across, from one continent to another to be able to see me. But me as a child, the story was, he doesn't love me enough, or is it the money? If he just had the money. So we create all of these things, and we don't realize a lot of them don't serve us anymore. And we can get to a place where we can shift that just by that self-awareness, just by saying, I'm willing to look at the facts of what really happened in my experience.
But it's fascinating too, is that there's, all kinds of science around our memories, and how often, I was just looking at something, they were talking about when there's a big traumatic thing, like the Challenger explosion was the example that they were talking about. And just 2.5 years later, like they did a survey of 106 people and asked them to answer specifics about 7 things, like where were you, and who were you with, and those kinds of things. And just 2.5 years later, they didn't even get half of the same details there. It's like, wow, here we think we're remembering, but there's so many other things impacting our memory between that time and now. It's like, okay, I couldn't possibly know what's true. A lot of times, it might be a family issue. My sisters are feeding me information, your mom or your dad against one another, or whatever it is. But there's so many ways in which our sense of what we think happened is being influenced, that you can't even trust that. So what do you want it to mean? Or just like you said, it just, for me, I get to help women, like, it's just doesn't serve me anymore. This story, it's like, great, that made me the amazing woman I am today. My dad was a crumb, but I'm strong and independent now. I don't have to keep only being strong and independent. I get to embrace that side of me and welcome in another story of, like, yeah, I love a strong, independent man who loves that feisty girl in me.
Exactly.
So
I love
what do you
I really love that, Kathy, because memory, oftentimes we think that we have total recall of a memory based on the feeling that it stirred up in us, right? And when we recognize that that's not necessarily true, that we can't possibly have total recall because we are basing it on the emotions and feelings that we had at that time, that are totally different than who we are now. And one of the things that came up for me earlier too was that when we project all of those things and all the things that we have felt in the past onto the present and the future, we're projecting from a child's perspective. So I like to, when I'm working with people, I tell them that there's a separation of the considerations of the child and the considerations of an adult, and to really look at the things that we have been feeling, the things that we have been doing through the perspective of the child. And now that we're an adult, we get to shift that perspective from an adult's perspective versus the child's perspective, and put it in its proper place.
Yeah.
And rear view mirror, so to speak, and not in the present. So we're not dragging the memories with us and living them over and over and over and over again through the perspective of the child. We can actually begin to look at things with different eyes.
Yeah, I think that comes with like the awakening part of it.
Absolutely.
I didn't even know a lot of the baggage, I would call it, that I was bringing, or that this little girl needed, until I started doing deeper work, and everything that took me deeper was something more tragic in my life, really. So it would make me just dive a little bit deeper and see, why am I hurting this way? Or why is it having this effect on me? You know, so I found definitely that's part of that awakening to go deeper to find out why that little girl hurt. I didn't know. But I don't know if people even know to look at the little girl or the little boy or, you know.
Yeah,
that-
I like to just ask the simple questions, just like you're saying. When we ask ourselves, sit in quiet and ask the question, what part of me is hurting in this way, or what part of me is missing something that this pattern keeps showing up, and ask, then oftentimes something specific will come to mind, like a 5-year-old, something that happened. And even if it was a real incident that, somebody slapped you or whatever the trauma was back then, and in the child's eyes, so many things can be trauma, of just asking, what did that child then need? So what was the meaning that we gave it, and what did that child need? And sit with her, imagine her or him sitting there with her, and just like a scared dog, that just sitting there, being present with it and asking her, what is it that you require now? How can I'm here for you. How can I support you through this? And allow, everybody's kind of echoed the same thing, that it's an emotion. Emotion is a vibration that's pinging in the body still. And when you sit with the emotion, it wants to come up. It wants to be healed. We're lucky to live in a time of consciousness is quickening, and it's asking to be healed, and to sit with it long enough. It may be scary. It may feel like pain. It may make you want to run and scream and hide, but to sit with it until it processes through. There may be even physical sensations that come up. You may want to scream if you want, but allow it to process through to the end, so it clears and it actually moves up and out of the body. So
That's so amazing, because it does move out of the body. I mean, by sitting and experiencing it and allowing it to come up, it's coming up because it's time. It's ready for you to let it go. It's ready for you to observe it, acknowledge it, think it, and let it go if it's not supporting you. And it's amazing because it does come up. And this combines a lot of the things that we each talk about. These trapped memories, and I call them trapped because they will stay within parts of our body energetically. And my master teacher, Rayleigh, who was an amazing woman, she used to say, you can see whether it's an inner child or an inner female, right? Or an inner boy or an inner male that's speaking, or that got stuck in the perception that has nothing to do with the truth, but in that pain point. That perception got stuck. And now you're ready to liberate it, and you're ready to process it through your heart and receive it as the adult, in the love that you are, in the different understanding that you are, so that now you can shift it completely. And I found that to be so powerful. I mean, it was some of the most beautiful work that I've done to heal myself and to heal others. Is to do that, is precisely to just sit and hold space for yourself or for someone else, and to allow these feelings to come up, to be able to look at them, to breathe through them, to cry through them, to punch a pillow through them, whatever you need, as long as you don't hurt yourself or anybody else, right? So that you can finally allow these things to process, and you can let them go, or you can realign them in the truth that you are now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that also extends to when we are able to do that for ourselves, and to see things in their proper perspective and light, we can begin to do that with those of us, those that we're in relationship with. Because the clearer we see ourselves, the clearer we're able to see others without the stories that we create around them. So for instance, people go into relationship and they want to see the potential in people, right? And they fall in love with that potential. They might get a glimpse of it, a snapshot of it, from the beginning to maybe 3 months into the relationship. And they think that's who that person is, or they know that that's who the person can be. But then other things begin to happen, and all the other manifestations and personality of the person start to come through. And all of a sudden, what you saw was a glimpse of the truth of a person tends to disappear and dissipate, right?
Mhm.
And those are red flags. It's not that you have to give up on the relationship, but how willing is the person that you're in a relationship with, whether it's a friend or a potential mate, how willing are they to see those things in themselves and to work with you and on themselves to bring more of that truth of who they are out, versus living from the personality manifestations of all the negative things that we've experienced in our lives. And we need to be able to see people in their true light, in their true livingness. We can say that we want great communication. We can say that we want to have wonderful, open relationships, but that has to be the livingness of the person as well, right?
Mhm.
Or at least the wanting and the desire to work for that to become more real for both parties. And when that doesn't happen, we have to take another look and see the reality of any given situation that is beyond the story that we're creating of who that person is showing up as.
Mhm.
That's really powerful, Carol. And I love, because it's really about becoming present with what it is right now. For me, my pattern was the crummy dad story that was gone when I was 6, kind of those times. So I had trust and abandonment kind of issues. And so my story about dating was that it's not that will men stay, it's they will leave. And it's a matter of when, kind of a thing. So I went in with all kinds of heart walls, guarding myself, and so I was protected. But I was always, the story of having that as my filter, I was always trying to sort and find the guys that I felt like I could trust. And which is trust is a great cornerstone, but if that's the only criteria you're using for a match, that's a really poor story I was operating from for many years. And just like you said, so I had this expectation, I was waiting for the story of the departure to happen. I wasn't able to be present with these amazing men that were showing up in my life, and I couldn't experience them to the fullest because I was in that guarded, when's this gonna, all come crashing down. So what a beautiful gift when we can, work with someone or do that for ourselves, to recognize those stories that are really, they're old stories, they're old crash and burn stories that we've got these crazy heart walls to protect us. But when they're protecting us, they're also leaving the good out. So
Kathy, and I love, because I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in here for a moment because it's such a similar story for me, Kathy. But I was the opposite. I was like, I'd bring in everything and present everything from the get-go. And it was like, okay, can you handle me? Because what you see is what you get. If you're going to leave, you better leave now, because further down the road, I'm not going to be able to take it. You know what I mean? And it was the opposite side of that guardedness. And I remember, two people that I love dearly telling me, Claudia, you're scaring them. Because it was like I needed somebody to prove to me that they weren't going to leave.
Yeah.
I needed somebody to prove to me that they loved me enough, or that they got me, or that they accepted me, that they understood me. I think I'm still searching for that a little bit.
I was going to say, I was sitting here saying, I feel like that's a forever process, right? That's part of the journey that we're always like,
right.
And I think being married, I was married 20 years. And
you were married 20 years?
20 years.
Hard to believe. You're old enough to have been married for 20 years.
I was married for 20 years. Yeah. And during that process, I mean, that's one of my, I don't want to call it trauma, but it's trauma when you separate from someone that's been there for 20 years, for more than 20 years. for more than, because we dated 2 years before that, and then we knew each other from high school, and we did. But it's trauma. It's trauma, and being able to separate the facts from the stories that happen through that process is huge. Because
it wasn't that long, but if it was a heartbreak, right? It could have been the love of your life. It could have been the love you always dreamt of. That is traumatic. That process of heartbreak is traumatic.
It's traumatic. It is. It is. And just like you were mentioning, being able to sit with yourself, Kathy mentioned that, and you say moving, like that is what that brings up. Like I relate everything back to the trauma, because it's the trauma that allowed me to sit with myself. To really go within, because I feel like my therapist used to always tell me the universe is up in the ante. When are you gonna listen?
Yeah.
And it's sitting with yourself, and like I always say, the body speaks. So ask the question and it'll tell you. So just like you said, when you sit with yourself and you ask that question, what's fact here? What's really fact? Because sometimes you don't even know the stories from the facts. So you done told it to yourself for so long. This is the facts. It's no longer
brutal honesty, doesn't it?
Brutal honesty, yes.
Brutal honesty with ourselves.
Brutal honesty.
Process.
Yes, it is. It's being honest with yourself, and then sometimes even the people during the process, to allow them to know, you know what, I'm growing. I saw where I really messed up, and I'm sorry. I think that goes a long way too, through that process, being able to say that you're sorry and things like that. I did want to mention something else, and I've totally forgot. It was about moving the energy. I think it was Claudia who had mentioned it, with being able to move the energy. And that's one of the practices that I not only went through, but I also teaches Qigong, where it teaches you to move your own energy through, these blockages that we have. And when they come in your joints and then they show up like pain. So being able to move that energy for yourself is huge. That's true, healing, going deep and knowing that your blockages are showing up and where they're showing up, and knowing that you have the power to do that yourself. Heal yourself, move your blockage. Even tapping is another practice that a lot of people use to move that blocked energy. And I think that's being able to recognize when that shows up is huge with your health, with how you're living.
And sorry, Joanna, like you said, the universe upping the ante. To me, when you said that, what immediately came up is, okay, when we do not acknowledge how we're feeling about our perceived realities, right? Or these traumas that have happened and that we've created these stories about, our body is still holding on to them. It will create discomfort. And if we do not listen, it will create disease.
Right.
And that's the way that the universe keeps telling us something's wrong that needs to be cleared here. Something about the perception, or something about the way that we are manifesting this reality, or carrying this belief with us, or this trauma with us. We need to let go of, because that's where the disease comes from. And so that energetic self-conscious awareness, that willingness to go in deep and be brutally honest with ourselves, which will change as we grow, of course, because today maybe I'm willing to see this much, but then tomorrow maybe I can see this much more, right? And that happens with the years. Also is why we help each other, and why we look for people who are facilitators, and we clear our chakras, and we do meditations, and we use these tools that we're going to be sharing with you, because sometimes we can't just do it all ourselves too. So it helps to have a teacher, a guide, a counselor, a coach who will help us clear chakras, or who will help us do a guided meditation, or who will hold space for us. So I just wanted to remind everybody, like, it's beautiful work. It's powerful work. We're here to support you if you need it. And we're here to share all those tools with you also, so that you can practice some of these things at home yourselves.
And it's funny that the words, we were talking about brutally honest, but honestly, it should be lovingly and compassionately honest with ourselves. And oftentimes, like Claudia and I were talking about our heart walls that had us show up wanting, and that's what I was wanting, is someone to show me that they're not going to leave, but I was pushing them away so that they could show that. For us to recognize that the love, that hole that we're needing, is to bring that 5-year-old child back and love her back into the wholeness of who we are, and to deepen our sense of self-love, so we find the greatest love of all within, as Whitney Houston and George Benson would say, the greatest love of all, that we don't need that from somebody else. And then that other person can become not just completing us, like worst line ever from Jerry Maguire, romantic but awful, just a little dependency. But when we can be like okay with whatever is going on, like we're in a time of change. There's going to be lots of turbulence coming up. If you are still seeking outside of yourself to feel whole and loved and worthy and valuable, you're going to have some issues. So if you think, looking back at the trauma is scary.
You are so right, Kathy.
That's great. That's so powerful.
Right. That's it.
And thank you for raising the vibration. We don't want to be brutally honest. We want to be lovingly honest. But also,
but what I meant by that was that what I meant by brutally honest is that I'm not saying that there's no love and compassion there. I'm just saying that we hide a lot from ourselves.
We do.
Absolutely.
And if we're really going to move the needle, so to speak, on our own transformational process, it takes courage to be that brutally honest. And yes, it takes love and compassion at the same time. So I'm not saying that there's no love and compassion there. That's the greatest love and compassion that we can provide ourselves, is to be that brutally honest. So it's not bad. I don't want people to go out there thinking
no.
We're beating ourselves up by the.
And I love that clarification. I think what I meant to say was just in the way that we phrased it semantically, which is nice to say, how willing are we to love ourselves? That was my teacher's favorite question. Are you willing to love yourself enough to let this go? Are you willing to love yourself enough to see this, to shift it? And it was so powerful.
That was the question I had to ask myself with my marriage. Was I willing to love myself enough to let this go? And that was very hard. It's still hard. I've only been divorced 4 years now, but it's still hard because I had to choose me. And that was, are you willing to love yourself enough to do it? And it was a lot to let go of, that I'm still letting go of. That's a process that I feel like you don't just let go.
Right.
Every year, I feel like I go through another. It was one of the things I had to walk through the spiral. I don't know if anybody's ever done that, but I've walked through the spiral. And
you're the only one.
Right. And then you get to the tree and you're like, and then you got to walk back out of it. But the thing about it is that's how I feel like with it's like a spiral, like every year another layer comes off and another, and that's the process of even awakening, just going through the journey. We're not here. We're all still learning and going. Kathy's about to be 60. Amazing. Y'all look amazing. And I'm grateful because they let me know we're all just still going through the process. Like there's a layer. I feel every month I've been feeling layers coming off lately. But that could be Carol will know more about the seasons that we're in and stuff like that, right? Stuff is just dropping off.
But you brought up a wonderful. Go ahead, Carol.
Go ahead.
Well, to me, you brought up a beautiful thing, because it was the ache of the, and the trauma of the breakup that broke you open to go in for the first time. When I got divorced, it was the first time I was like, okay, now who's going to tell me what to think? I was like, oh, I guess I get to figure that out. And it can be, so what are we making the breakup mean? I'm a failure in the church, man. Because my folks got divorced, there was such pain in my family. I promised myself I would never do that, and I wouldn't inflict that kind of pain on other people. And it was so it was going against myself. It was going against my church. It was going against my family, like all these other oaths and vows. And it took me many years to work through to the point that, as you said, Joanna, of choosing myself. And to me, I think that's the great permission slip that we want to share with anyone who's listening now, is listen, like honor yourself. And what do you need? What do you need right now? And maybe it's this inward journey to find those places where we think we're inadequate, that the old stories maybe it's just an old story that simply doesn't fit anymore with where you are now and where you want to go. How long have you been holding on to it? And if you're holding bitterness and anger and resentment, those are like poisons, and we're the one holding the poison in our body. Like, how long do you want to
next week?
Oh, so you got to come back next week, because we're diving deep in.
Yes.
Awesomeness. Yeah, such a vibrant conversation, though.
Mm-hmm.
You go, girl.
There is.
Go, Carol.
I don't remember what I was going to say, but one of the things that Claudia had brought up earlier about really exaggerating the belief systems that we have and playing them out, because then we can see the falseness of it, and we can give it humor, and we can then, it releases its energy on us. It releases the hold it has on us when we can bring humor to it and see that we can actually lighten it up. And it's a lot easier to release things from that perspective. One of the things that I was taught was, once you become aware of a belief system as a belief system, then you can play with it. You can laugh at it. You can laugh about it, and you can exaggerate it. So for instance, I was always wanting attention because I felt like I was never being heard when I was a child, right? And so I injected myself into conversations when it wasn't appropriate, because I would get frustrated that I wasn't being heard, or that nobody was steering the conversation in my direction. And so what did I do about that? I wanted to be the center of attention. I went out and I created a networking group. Guess what? I was the leader of the group. I was up at the front. People had to pay attention to me. I had the room. So I did that on purpose to make that belief system, to exaggerate the belief system about myself. And it totally went away. So, I don't have to be the center of attention anymore. I could care less if I talk or not. And so when the time came that there was an entry point for me to speak, that's when I spoke. So there was never any more inappropriateness being pushed or projected out from me, because I was no longer feeling like I needed to grab the attention.
You could trust. You could trust.
Trusted myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting because, I did become an actor for a reason. And it was interesting. In my home, it became Sundays was the time when Claudia was going to put on the show. Since I can remember, since I was about 1.5 years. And I would dance and I would sing and I would perform and I'd do a monologue and I'd, take down palm trees and make them hula skirts and whatever it was. And it was fantastic because yes, it gave me an opportunity to be creative and to explore all the stuff that was in me. But a huge part of that was that need to be seen, that need to feel that my mom had the time for me. Right. And if you stop to think about it, every single one of us as children needed that from mom and dad. We each, every single inner child needed that. I see you, I hear you. You are important to me. What you have to say is important to me. And I used to talk a lot, and I still do get very excited about sharing, but I've learned to listen a lot more, because then you're giving the person you're with that space and that connection, and you're holding that space for someone. And it's magic. It's magic, because then the connection becomes a completely different experience where we can share our views. And as one of you ladies was saying before, I think it may have been Carol, this need to change somebody else's point of view, to have them see it my way. Oh boy, I spent a lot of wasted energy in that, right? Like, oh my God, it just makes me hot now. I'm like, I way too much energy, is too much effort. And it's why world wars are still happening. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? If we could just live and let live and start understanding there may be more than one right perspective. I want to share this for a moment, because this was an example that also blew my mind away and opened my perception. If you look at a car accident from each one of the 4 different corners in an intersection, each one of those people is going to have a different perception of the facts. They're all real. It just depends on where they were standing. They may not have the complete set of facts, but that doesn't mean that there isn't more than one real set of facts. But they're all based also on the perception.
Right.
And I found that so powerful and so liberating, because it doesn't have to be one right, one wrong. We can both be right or agree to disagree.
Another similar kind of a metaphor is, I think it's a Buddhist descent, but talking about the people that are blindfolded and they are led up to an elephant, and each one is on a different part of the elephant. So if you hold the tail, it's going to feel like a skinny stick with, little, and if you feel a leg, it feels like a tree trunk with crazy skin. If you feel the front trunk, it's like, oh, it's a big snake. And like you said, every single one of those experiences is as real as it can be, but it's missing the benefit of the larger perception. And to me, that's what we're called into now. The spiritual side of us, that higher self, actually knows the truth. And if we can begin to ask bigger questions, the quality of the questions we ask our higher self, the more we'll move into this beautiful space where it's like, oh, perhaps, this was not the entire truth. And like Carol's called this, it's accepting the isness. It's like, okay, that was true for me, and it doesn't serve me now. So the future story. I love this group because it's so diverse. And I'd be curious, I want to ask Joanna and Claudia in particular a question, because we have the personal stories that we've been talking about. And I talked about, the age story, and there's a whole generation of women that are in my age range that are fighting against a societal story about, getting old means the beginning of the end and you're irrelevant. And women, a lot of women have really big challenges around that. But there's also like cultural stories that we buy into. So, actually, Joanna, you want to go first? And I'd love to hear from Claudia too, because you both have, those experiences too.
Oh, there's so many we could buy into. Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's there's just so many. I mean, just the whole. See, I'm on a different belief system. So like the whole black and white and good and bad, and just starting there alone and just going into what serves me from what doesn't serve me. I have great black friends and I have great white friends. So I've had, so just buying into that system. And that takes us down a whole, are we different? I do believe genes and everything. Yes, there's different things that happen, but when we buy into the whole system of it, I believe like slavery, we're all enslaved. If we go with really what the government has done to us and everything, it's a unit. We're all enslaved. So it's so many systems. I feel like as Black people, yes, we have definitely bought into a lot of crime that has happened. Is not buying into it. I believe it's happening. It is happening. So, there's so many things that we could.
You mentioned something that's very powerful, Joanna, which is, do we buy into the belief system? Meaning that doesn't mean that these facts and things didn't happen. Are we joining that wavelength of beliefs?
Right.
Are we going to get into that perception of, is this right or wrong? Is this, and it happens, I think, Kathy was asking us a lot about age, how we perceive age as well, or immigration, or anything that separates us.
And that's what it is.
And that's what it is. And to me, my entire, aside from my religious background that I was born and raised with, my path of life has been one of finding the oneness of things. And my spiritual teacher said, there's nothing outside of yourself. Right. Everything is part of who you are. Everything in manifestation, everyone in manifestation is a part of who you are. We are all connected. We don't realize it. We don't sometimes acknowledge it. And sometimes what we're seeing is a mirror reflection of a part of us we don't really like. And we want to keep separate and say, oh, no, that's not me. But it's just another manifestation of you. And in the wholeness of all that is, right? And this is my favorite explanation that I read about God, or the grand organizing design, whatever that means for you, is that we're all manifestations of the truth. And the only way for God to know itself is to separate itself from itself in the myriad, impossibly infinite versions of itself, so that it can get to know itself and experience itself. Beautiful. And if we stop to look at that, then everything that we dislike that's quote unquote opposite from our perception, from our views, or from our reality is there as a gift for us too, because it's another part of ourselves manifesting that is just as valid as ours. We may not like it, but if we can accept this oneness, if we can accept this understanding, it's mind-blowing because it changes everything in our reality. And so what of these limiting beliefs do we cater to, right? These kind of cultural beliefs, like age, like race, like nationality. Age, I mean, Kathy asked that, and I think that's so powerful. I hope to be like in skates when I'm 85. That was my goal.
I can't get on skates now.
I want to go rolling disco.
That's a story, Joanna.
By that, by the way. But it was my saying. It was like, I want to stay this vibrant and young and be the dancer and the playful part of me until the day I die. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I'll make it, but I'm working on it.
But I like how Joanna said, because the cultural thing, like we can buy into so much of what's happening in the culture. And there's a lot of things. I mean, look at the medical world, the educational world, like all of these institutions they have lots of stories they're feeding us that aren't necessarily benefiting us with where we want to go from here. So if we can, yeah. It's as simple as that. Creating a vivid vision of where I want to go, like Claudia or me, our 80th birthdays, we're going to be in some rockin', crazy fun thing that we're creating for ourselves. Yeah. And then like, do those things serve me? Like along the way, you get to choose out of those things. It might have been true, like you're saying, Joanna, that the love that you had that fell apart with your marriage, like those things were real, but I don't need to hang on to that part of the story anymore. So it's the practice of letting go. One of my favorite practices is just the simple Ho'oponopono, and it's that Hawaiian forgiveness prayer, and it's just so simple, so simple. It's 4 little statements. It's I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, I thank you. And essentially, you're saying it to the other person, you're saying it to the circumstance too. You know, my marriage came together because I was looking for the man to trust. I'm so sorry. Now that I've got that perspective, I understand the faulty choice that I made and the pain I inflicted on him, having to deal with me. But and then mostly to me, I'm sorry that I didn't love myself enough to know that I could have said no to that opportunity, you know, and chosen to wait until I found me so I could make the right choice. So I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, I thank you. And so when we absolve ourselves of the guilt and the shame and the blame of ourselves for making such a poor choice, it allows us then to breathe new life into this moment now and make a new choice that works for you.
For me, I think, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish, Kathy.
Sorry, I just want to say one quick thing with Kathy, which is, and we get to also say, maybe it was exactly the perfect choice for you to learn and to be where you are now.
Yeah, like you said, there's always a gift in everyone. Every crash and burn holds within it the seed of a gift of the awareness. And with that awareness, we get to this beautiful space.
Right.
And sorry, interrupted, Carol.
No, that's right, because you led me right into where I wanted to go anyway, because from my perspective, it's not about forgiveness. It's truly about accepting that we didn't know what we didn't know, and we didn't know. We did the best we could wherever we were at any stage of our lives. We've done the best we could, because if we didn't do the best that we could, we would have done something different, and we didn't. It's just the way it is. It's a fact. And so for me, I don't feel like I need to forgive myself because I didn't know something. I don't feel I need to forgive myself for something that I didn't know at the time. Mm-hmm. And like I said before, we're all living through our own reality tunnel. And so when we can open up that perspective and see a greater vista of not only of our own life, but begin to see the greater vista and spans of how the world is, we can be more accepting. And I believe that we are here to learn lessons, and there are no mistakes. We're students of being human, and therefore there are no mistakes. What we do to ourselves, we do to the world, and vice versa. We are the world is us. And so we're all in it together, whether we like it or not. The thing is can we accept it or not? Mm-hmm. Can we accept another for who they are, where they are, and do that for ourselves as well? Mm-hmm. And for me, that's the key to living in present time, and to be able to live harmoniously with one another.
Yeah. Powerful.
So we're at the 5 o'clock mark. What have we got going on our next show, which is coming up?
Joanna,
you want to share with us, Joanna, what you're going to be talking about?
I know it's about this ease with the body.
Say that again.
This ease with the body. So we're going to talk more about the energetic part of who we are and the blockages that we spoke about today. We're just going to go a little bit deeper into that we just keep going. That's all. But we'll talk about those blockages and some tools to help you move those things out the way. That's our next episode, which would be
November
October.
6th, November 6th.
October.
No, October.
Sweetie.
Yeah, 14th.
Oh,
October
I'm so
14th.
sorry. I'm already in the middle of October. Forgive
We
me.
accept you.
Thank you.
October 16th.
Quite okay. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'd love to invite everybody who's watching, please, please, please share comments. If there's a particular subject you want to know more about, let us know. We have tons and tons of topics that we can share with you and things that we want to share, but we want to know more about what you're interested in and the kinds of topics you'd like us to open up a discussion with. So please share those in the chat, share them on our Instagram page, mysticmavens.us, and share them on our YouTube channel, because we'd love to be able to have those conversations that you're interested in as well.
Yes, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining
Care.
us, everyone. We hope you enjoy the replay.
Yay.